We disembarked the Koningsdam on October 28th, a blustery, chilly, rainy morning. Wind. This is not fun for disembarking. When you enter the terminal to board a ship in Civitavecchia, the terminal is nice, everything is very pretty. It's definitely a big terminal and looks similar to an airline terminal. But there are people there working, and it's a relatively nice looking place, and they usher you through, and there are seats to sit in, and it's all kind of nice. When you disembark in Civitavecchia, you don't go through there. Instead, you leave the ship and you enter what amounts to a great big warehouse. And they remove your luggage the night before, and so when you enter this big cavernous warehouse, your luggage is all sitting out in a row with everyone else's luggage, and you have to go find yours. And so we did that. And of course you look outside and you realize that it's pouring rain, and I had asked ahead of time how we would go about changing from the Koningsdam to the Meraviglia, hoping that somebody would tell me, oh, it was just real easy. One is right next to the other. You just walk next door. But it was very obvious we weren't going to be walking anywhere. And furthermore, the Meraviglia was not next door. During breakfast, I had gone outside to look, and it was a convenient place to do it, up on the deck where the buffet is. And I looked at one end of the ship as far as I could see, and there was no Meraviglia. And I went to the other end of the ship, and there was no Meraviglia in sight. And the Meraviglia is an enormous ship, and I couldn't see her. So at any rate, the long story short was that we had to get on a shuttle bus that took us from the port into town to a little square where there was a couple of tents, and from there we had to board another shuttle bus that took us right back where we had just come from and deposited us at the proper terminal for the Meraviglia. Except that the Meraviglia, as I have said, wasn't there. Instead of being in port where she was supposed to be, the Meraviglia was hovering out of sight, out of the port, trying to get in. The wind was so bad that she couldn't. And this is an ominous situation. What do they do if they can't get into port? This happens from time to time, and obviously the cruise ships have plan B, but the passengers have no idea what plan B is. So it makes for a little anxiety. At any rate, we did as we were told, went to this god-awful little place with the tents. This all would have been fine had the weather been decent, but of course had the weather been decent, the Meraviglia would have been where she was supposed to have been, and none of this drama would ever have happened. But at any rate, we got back to the terminal. They checked us in. They did what is a preliminary check-in, not the final one, but a preliminary thing. Put us through security, and then thankfully the place where we waited at least had a little cafe. And so that meant that there was a possibility of getting some food. We arrived there about 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and we waited. And about 12:30, it became obvious we could see the Meraviglia in the distance. They were attempting to bring the ship into port, and over a period of about 45 minutes to an hour, it became obvious they were going to bring her in. And my hat's off to the guy who is the captain of this ship. I just, you can't believe how big this ship is. It's just, cruise ships are big. This ship is enormous. And that captain brought that ship in and then proceeded to turn it around in this tiny little place. And the next time somebody tells me that it's hard to parallel park, I'm just going to have to slap him. Because my God, what he managed to do in this tiny little area. Anyway, he docked the ship, and then we had to wait until we boarded. And that led to the Great European. Just like boarding an airplane, they typically will give you an assignment, a boarding assignment. You're in group 1 or 2 or whatever. And on cruise ships, usually this is broken down by hierarchy. The more expensive your cabin is, or the more status you have as a frequent traveler with this particular cruise line, the faster your boarding is. And I'm aware of that. There's no problem with it. It's usually handled without a hitch. And that's what they endeavored to do here. But Europeans don't really do lines. I don't know any other way to say it. They don't do lining up. They bunch up. And they put up those ropes that funnel you back and forth like at Disney World. And Europeans just climb under the ropes. They just bunch in a big bunch. And they don't think that this is rude. They don't think that it's out of line. This is just what they do. And I kind of knew this. I mean, we've been here for the better part of, over 3 weeks now, and you kind of get used to it after a while, that everyone tries to get on the bus all at the same time. Everyone tries to get off the bus all at the same time, and nobody queues up. So that's what happened. Well, Dave and I just decided to take a seat and let them do their thing. And as it turned out, there were probably in excess of 500 of us that were in the terminal trying to board this ship. To make matters worse, the Meraviglia didn't dock until 12:30 or thereabouts. Was supposed to have docked at 8 a.m. This meant that any people on board who weren't leaving the ship permanently, but who had planned to go to Rome for the day and had made plans for a trip to Rome, were screwed. Their trip didn't happen. So it meant that all the passengers who were on board the ship, who were staying on board the ship, never got off the ship. They never left because the weather was too bad. So the ship was dealing with an influx of 500 or so new passengers, as well as a certain number, probably equal to that were disembarking permanently, who were leaving the end of their cruise. And then all the other passengers who were on board and should have gotten off for the day but didn't get off for the day. And when the Meraviglia, our room steward told us, is full. The cruise was sold out. The capacity is 5,600 passengers. I'm going to repeat that. 5,600 passengers. There are 2,500 crew members. That means that there are in excess of 8,000 people on this ship. And I will tell you this. We've been on board now for 2 days. And I have personally been on the elevator with all 8,000 of them at one point or another. It's a huge, enormous ship. It's also full of people. I have heard people say that these megaships don't feel crowded, that they don't feel like there's just millions of people on board. This is not one of those ships. This ship feels full. It feels overfull. It feels crowded. There's lots of people. The only place you can get any quiet is in your room. Everywhere else is noisy and full of people, bodies, humans. They're everywhere. I don't know that we'll ever go on another megaship again. It's an interesting experience. I'm glad we've done it, but it sure is different. And I feel kind of bad for a few people that I've met, the very few English-speaking people that we run into. Several of those people are on their very first cruise of their whole life. And I suspect there are some of them that will never cruise again because they're getting a negative impression from the situation on this trip, this cruise. Anyway, on the positive side, and there are always positives and negatives to everything, what I'm doing here is a kind of a compare and contrast thing. And it is extremely subjective, and these are my opinions. And everybody's opinion is different. I am on the same cruise with another woman who boarded the same time I did yesterday. She's outraged over what she considered the chaos of our boarding yesterday. And I get why she's upset. It wasn't a great deal of fun. It wasn't that bad. It was mostly hurry up and wait. She was kind of appalled by the way everyone bunched up, as I mentioned. But I expected that because these are Europeans and that's how they behave. That's what they do. They don't think they're being rude. They don't think they're being out of control. This is just what they do. They're very used to it. They don't think it's odd or weird. I don't think any of them were particularly upset. We were kind of used to it, and so it didn't bother us. But opinions differ, and people's impressions differ. And if I have to wait to board a ship because the captain had trouble getting the ship into port because the weather was so windy, and the alternative plan had been to put all of us passengers, boarding passengers, on buses and take every last one of us to Naples, from which we had just come, in order to board there, possibly having to spend the night in Naples before boarding. Well, if I have to wait for an hour or two in a terminal to avoid that, I'm perfectly happy with the whole situation. I don't want the captain of this ship to be foolhardy and do something stupid. The weather simply didn't cooperate. Another, and of course, this led directly to 500 or more people boarding this ship right at what in Europe is lunchtime, which is about 2 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Every single person went to the buffet for lunch. This included all of us that had just boarded the ship and were dying of starvation, and all of the people who had had to stay on the ship because they couldn't get off the ship and who otherwise would have been out sightseeing. But they weren't because they were stuck. So everyone was in the buffet. And the buffet was absolute chaos. There's no other way to describe it. It was just wall-to-wall human beings all trying to eat food, and it was vultures descending on this, you know. And I took it all as, you know, yeah, this is bad, but it wasn't that bad. The food is European. This is an Italian cruise line. The overwhelming majority of the passengers are European. Almost nobody speaks English. And that leads directly to a very interesting thing. It's an odd feeling to be an American, to grow up, to live all my life in America, all my life surrounded by people who speak my language, who understand my idioms, who, even if they don't share my accent, I don't have any problem conversing with them, who get my jokes, all of those things. And to go from there to a foreign country where all the signs are in a different language and all that, that's one thing. Most of the time, I can figure out a sign written in Italian. I have enough Spanish, and Spanish and Italian are, especially the written languages, are very similar. And so in Rome and all these other Italian cities, I was able to kind of manage and get around and figure out what the signs are. And in a lot of places, the signs are bilingual. You know, the main sign is in Italian, but then down below it is in smaller letters is the English. And that's all fine. And on the Koningsdam, which by the way had about 2,600 passengers as opposed to 5,600 passengers, the overwhelming majority of those people were white, upper, middle class Americans, Canadians, Australians. There were some Europeans, there were some Asians, but not many. And you did hear other languages in the buffet and in the hallways and places like that. But all the announcements are made in English, all the signage is in English. The ship operates in American English. It feels like America. You get on this ship and it's a whole different world. We are in an Italian world here. Everyone is Italian. All the little kids are Italian. Everybody is. And if they're not Italian, they're Spanish. And we are the distinct minority. My guess is that out of 5,600 passengers, there probably aren't more than 400 or 500 Americans. And I'm making a big guess there, but I don't think I'm far off the mark. There are no more than that, maybe even less. I have run into our table mates at dinner, 2 women who are from New York. I ran into one couple and their teenage children from Ireland who speak English, and that's it in 2 days. Everyone else is busy talking in another language. And this is a disconcerting experience. I highly recommend it, actually.